This is a demo and sharing session about peppered cottons. My name's Cory. I'm from Beaufort, North Carolina, but I'm here at Quilt Market in Houston, Texas. And until recently, peppered cottons, which are shot cottons, were not available in pre-cuts. They were only available by the yard on the bolt, which is wonderful. Here's a color card of all 50 colors. And they've been selling well, and I've been really pleased by that. I turn around at this particular quilt market and find that they've done this. So this is a cut selection of 40 out of the 50 colors on this card. So not everything is included here. But in order to make this, which they sometimes call a jelly roll bundle, correct, 40 pieces. They're cut 2.5 inches wide. They're cut with a slight serration on the edge, as with very fine pinking shears. So you don't pre-wash when you use a jelly roll. You just use it as is. And I was thinking, well, since this is already pre-cut, why don't I use it for the most classic American quilt pattern, which is log cabin? But I'm here at this show, didn't rent a sewing machine, so I needed to do it by hand. The main thing was to break down the jelly roll into the usable combinations. So because log cabin is all about light colors versus dark colors, I went through the jelly roll and pulled out lights and darks that were comparable to each other. A light blue, a dark blue, a light green, a dark green. You can see that each of these are paired. And then it was very easy for me to always keep the order straight. In the center of the log cabin, there's always a little square. And I decided to opt for something really different, which is orange in this case. So I cut a 2.5 inch square. This is definitely a DIY situation. By bending over the pre-cut strip, and there's the square. And it goes into the center of a backing block, which is cut 8.5 inches. This particular version of the log cabin is actually called roof tile. It comes from the Isle of Man, which is between Ireland and England, and it's always done by hand, and it's quilted and pieced at the same time. When this block is done, it's finished, and all I have to do is join this with other blocks just like it, and the quilt is done. There's no batting inside this. So when you're working that way, there's my center fabric, the orange. It is quite different than the lights and darks. That was what I wanted. Now that doesn't mean there's not a lot left in the jelly roll. All of this that's come apart came out of that, because once you take the band off the jelly roll, it sort of explodes. And there's lots and lots of colors to choose from. So that came out of that. But this whole story is about light versus dark. So the needle I'm using today is a milliner's needle, sometimes called a straw needle. And this is a size 10, and it's long and very, very sharp. And that's needed when you're hand sewing through as many as 6 layers. You want it to go through like butter. You don't want any kind of resistance. I use John James. I happen to like handmade in England needles, best quality. Now the thread I'm using is a number 40 weight, and 40 is 1 weight heavier than what we usually use for clothing and piecing and things like that. I chose a color which blended almost carefully with my backing fabric. My quilting stitches are not always wonderful, so it's a good idea in that case to choose a comparable thread rather than something that's different. Number 40 Presencia thread is not waxed. It can be used for hand quilting and for mending. It is heavy but very thin and strong. So I threaded up my needle and started sewing the strips onto the center. When you hand sew, I think it's best not to sew over here like this, because then it kind of hurts your neck and your shoulders and all, but to rest your forearms on the table and to also let your opposing hand do some of the work. So when you're hand sewing, the thumb of the opposing hand gets into it and pleats the fabric up right in front of the needle. So I just took 6 stitches at a time. The needle is handled horizontally rather than up and down like this. It goes very quickly. When you come almost to the end of the strip that you're sewing, and I'm almost there, I'm going to keep my thumb on it. When I come to my own thumb, I'm going to go down to the back of the piece and park my needle out of the way, because what I have to do here is a pleat that's in a certain conformation. Instead of going all the way back like we do in American log cabin, you do a 1-to-3 ratio. So a third of it lies on the fabric, a third goes over itself, and a third is on the backing fabric. The reason for these pleats is that they actually catch warmth, and that's in lieu of a batting. So no batting needed in this quilt. And now we're going to turn the thing this way, the block this way, and pick another light. And this time I guess I'll go for the gray, because I don't think I've used that one yet. Cut off the fuzzy ends. As you can see, this is not precision work. It's precise in that the backing is cut exactly 8.5 inches, and we will go no farther and no less than 8.5 inches. But the stitching is not particularly fine. When you match the thread that well to the fabric, you have a little bit of leeway. So I'm going to pin that strip on so it stays in place. And now I come back and go to the needle that I'd parked out of the way. And I take one more stitch in the same line that I had just stitched, one more there, poke it through, and we are ready to go there. People who do a lot of quilting say, well, look, this part is not stitched. You catch it on the next round. The interesting thing is if I was perhaps stitching in contrasting thread, this would look like a continuous spiral on the back, which is good. Especially on the Isle of Man, they are descendants of Celtic people, and the spiral is good luck. They don't like breaking the thread. So if you do any knots, it will all happen here on top.
Because the knots are all hidden.
Yes, because the knots are all hidden. Exactly. So we'll put the thumb on there and gather 5 to 6 stitches at a time. Again, these are the size needles I'm using. They're long, thin, and very sharp.
Milliner's 10, okay.
Yeah, milliner's 10. Yeah. The opposing thumb does as much work as this hand does. And most hand sewing is like that. It's really a two-handed operation. And you might say to yourself, well, some of those stitches are really dreadful. I mean, has she ever entered a show and the judge has said something?
Who cares?
The answer to that is no. The answer is no. But I've taught a lot of people how to do this block. People who protested, I'm not a quilter. I don't know how to do precision things. I don't know how to put triangles and things together. And now we come to the magic pleat. It's a third, a third, a third. And I'm almost to the edge on this one. I could push it nap. I'm going to make this a little smaller. When this quilt block is joined to others of its type, you will not notice if one or two of the blocks are off by a tiny bit. That's very forgiving. On the Isle of Man, this work is done primarily with wool fabric. And we're working with cotton today. I come back again and I've located that needle. I've done 2 lights. I'm now ready for the last row of darks. And the edge of the block is the edge of the work. You never go any further than that. So this time, I think I'll take the dark gray, cut a piece of it to size, approximate size, turn the block, and pin in place. Now, these strip bundles come to the shop owner in a box with 6 of them, and that's $111. So the cost comes out to about $18.50 a piece. It's suggested that you retail this for anywhere from $39.95 to $44.95. The nice thing is they get 40 colors, and they adore that. What I'm using here, of course, is not all 40 of them. I picked out pairs of corresponding lights and darks. This is the rest of the, I guess you'd call it a jelly roll.
Yep.
Well, I'm always careful
It's
because
just a strip roll.
another company
Yes.
invented
roll.
that. Okay, yes, well, you need to be careful about that.
It's like Kleenex, right?
Yes, it's like Kleenex, exactly. Other people have worked with the peppered cotton, so I'd like to point out a few things. This is made with the peppered cottons, and this is a lovely little piece, and it is by Penny Doucette. And she was able to choose pairs of fabrics that contrasted beautifully. This was done for our blog hop, which happened in the month of September. And I was really surprised and pleased. So many people worked with peppered cottons. There are the 50 shades. The quilt behind us was done in celebration of the 85th birthday of this company. And of course, this fabric is specially printed. And there are the photographic things of members of the family and the progression of the business. But all the rest of the fabrics that you see in it are peppered cottons. Peppered cottons are shot cottons. Are you? Yeah, I'm probably preaching to the choir here. You know what a shot cotton is?
No.
No.
Thank goodness there's somebody who doesn't know, so I can talk to you. A shot cotton is a fabric in which the warp threads are woven in one color and the weft in another. And so that means that the color that's eventually produced is a visual blend of those two things. So for instance, this color, which we call grello on the chart, is actually woven out of a charcoal gray. Now it's a charcoal gray and yellow in the other direction. But it comes out as kind of a pale green. Okay? This is actually a very bright green and a bright red.
Really?
Yeah. But this is what happens. This color is one of my favorites. I called it raisin. And you have to call the color something. And it's a combination of a deep blue and rust. And it makes that. Isn't that fun?
It is.
For every kid who ever mixed paints, this is your fabric. And you can also make shot cottons look different according to what they're placed next to. So we could take this one, which is actually a combination of turquoise and orange, and we could put it with a lot of turquoises and make it go very green. Excuse me, it's not turquoise and orange. It is turquoise and tan. So it could look gray or green, depending on what it's next to. So they look like solids on the card, but they can do some marvelous things. I love the weave of it. These are woven in India, and they're woven in a family manufactory in Chennai, which is on the southeast coast. And this is a family that have been weaving shot fabrics for 100 years. Normally in India, shot cottons are woven very light. They're woven for summer saris. You know, it gets very hot in Chennai. It's tropical. And it's about 10 to 12 yards in a sari. So whatever you wear during the hot season has got to be very thin. So when the shot cottons formerly were woven there, they were like almost like gauze, really, really thin. I think probably the biggest challenge working with the weavers was to convince them we needed it thicker. We needed this fabric to be the weight of good quality cottons in a quilt store. So we think it's happened, and we're very pleased. These have been out for 2 years, I believe. And this, the backing block, was introduced last spring, but it is only shipping this month. This is called Brushstrokes, and it's also by the weavers in Chennai. It's 16 colors, And it's literally a mono tie-dye where they took the warp and they tie-dyed it within this color family, which is browns, and then they also made the weft the same thing. And it comes out as a weave that looks like it has more texture. It's just as soft as the peppered cottons. 16 colors in this. So this is what I do. I get to sit and talk with people all day at Quilt Market and sew by hand. And sew by hand. I mean, what a great job.
I know. Somebody's got to do it.
There are some instructions on dealing with peppered cottons that let me see, I wrote that, yep, 2 years ago, July. Here. You would not pre-wash pre-cuts. Come on, don't do that.
Unless you want an inch strip, but that's
Right,
okay.
they'll turn into string. I mean, you'll have to call the Maytag repairman right away. But otherwise, I do wash my peppered cottons. I wash all my fabric. And some interesting things happen. The colors intensify when you wash it. This is unwashed, and the color's called jungle green. And this is washed, and it has deepened and intensified. So, because the weave is closer, exactly. These fabrics, just before they're doubled and rolled on the bolt, have a finish that's applied to make them slightly shiny and slick so that they go through the machinery well and don't catch. Once that's washed and it's come off, then you get this really, really intense color. I just adore this.
And it beefs
So,
up.
and it beefs up. You can actually feel the difference. If you take the only way to really tell the difference is to take a single layer of the washed and compare it to a single layer of the unwashed. And what you can feel is that literally there's less air there, you know. It has come together.
How much shrinkage?
It is comparable to other shrinkage. I believe it's between 4 and 6%. Okay? All right. I had no shrinkage at all, selvage edge to selvage edge. And in a yard, and I cut the yard exactly, I had a 1/2 inch.
Oh, that's not bad.
But when you wash these fabrics, my suggestion is that you don't wash them by themselves. When you wash them by themselves, and you've got a small amount of fabric swimming around in a lot of water, it beats it up more. Put it in with your regular wash. Follow the normal precautions. Put the darks in with something dark and the light. I always put in those things called color catchers. What I find is with the very intense colors like this almost ultraviolet purple, that you will find some purple migrating into the color catcher. And that's good, actually. It means you've knocked off the very last of the dye fibers on that. And then I put it into the dryer and dry it for perhaps 15 minutes. Take it out when it's just slightly damp. And of course, I'm not going to iron it all right away. But just before I want to start a project, I will tear off the amount I'm going to use and press just that. So I use it for hand piecing, for applique, though I switched to a 60 thread for applique. It's much lighter than this. And 50, of course, for straight patchwork sewing. We have this on the website of Studioe, and you can go and look at it and download it and print it for your customers if you like. What are peppered cottons, or what are shot cottons in general, and all kinds of bits of advice. I can't shut up about working with it.
We did wonderful. Thank you.
It's been a dream come true to look for the fabric you wanted to work with and find a company that would make it.
Yes.
It doesn't get any better for a quilt maker. So,
Very good. Thank you.
thanks for coming by.